Welcome to Creepy Corner Stories. And remember, some jobs will cost you more than just your time. Working the night shift, it sounds easy, right? No bosses breathing down your neck, no rush hour madness, just you, alone, in the dark. But when the world sleeps, something else wakes up. And if you're not careful, you might be the one it chooses next. Tonight, we step into the shadows of late-night jobs, where security cameras catch glimpses of things that shouldn't be there, where customers walk in but never seem to leave, where a simple shift can turn into your worst nightmare. Let's begin. Story: The Last Customer. I used to work the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station in a quiet town. It was usually dead after midnight, with only the occasional trucker stopping by. But one night, something happened that made me quit for good. It was around 2:45 a.m. when the door chime rang. I looked up from my phone and saw a man standing by the entrance. He was tall, wearing a hooded jacket, and didn't move, just stood there, staring at me. Can I help you?" I asked, but he didn't respond. His face was shadowed under the hood, but I could feel his eyes on me. Then, without a word, he turned and walked straight to the back of the store, disappearing behind the shelves. The security cameras showed him moving, but something was off. His reflection in the glass cooler doors wasn't there. I felt my stomach drop. I called out again, my voice shaking. "Sir, we're closing soon." Silence. I stepped out from behind the counter and walked towards the back. As I turned the corner, he was gone. The only exit was past me, and I never saw him leave. Then, the store phone rang. I ran back and picked it up. A static-filled voice whispered, "Don't follow him." My blood ran cold. I looked at the security monitor again, and there he was, standing right outside the glass doors. Only this time, his face was pressed against the glass, grinning. I bolted to the storeroom, locked myself in, and called my manager. By the time help arrived, the man was gone. The only thing left behind was a single handprint on the door. A handprint with no fingers. I never worked a night shift again. Story: The Man in the Freezer. I used to work the overnight shift at a small diner off the highway. It wasn't much, just a few booths, a kitchen, and a walk-in freezer in the back. Most nights it was dead quiet, except for the hum of the neon sign outside. But one night, I learned that something else was there with me. It was around 3 a.m. when I first heard it, a faint tapping sound. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but then it got louder. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the freezer. Thinking maybe a package had fallen, I grabbed my keys and unlocked the heavy metal door. Freezing air spilled out, and I stepped inside, scanning the shelves. Nothing. Just boxes of frozen meat and bags of ice. I was about to leave when I noticed something strange. There were footprints in the frost-covered floor, bare footprints, and they led behind a stack of boxes. My breath caught in my throat. No one else was working that night. And even if they were, why would they be barefoot in a freezer? I reached for my radio to call my manager, but before I could press the button, "Cold, isn't it?" A voice whispered right behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly slipped. But there was no one there, just empty space and swirling mist from my breath. I ran out, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My heart pounded in my chest, but as I backed away, I heard it again, tap, 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 coming from inside the freezer. I called my manager, barely able to get the words out. He arrived 20 minutes later and checked the freezer himself. But when he opened the door, the footprints were gone. The next morning, I put in my 2 weeks. The manager just chuckled and said, "Guess you met the freezer man, huh? You're not the first." I never asked what he meant. I didn't want to know. Story: The Thing in the Parking Lot. I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour convenience store. It wasn't a bad job, just long hours, cleaning up spills, and dealing with the occasional drunk customer. But one night, I realized that some things that come in after midnight aren't human. It was a slow night, almost dead silent. Around 2 a.m., I stepped outside for a smoke. The parking lot was empty, except for one car. It was an old sedan parked near the edge of the lot, facing the store. Its headlights were off, but something about it felt wrong. The engine wasn't running. No one got in or out. But the longer I looked, the more I felt like someone or something was staring at me from inside. I squinted, trying to see through the windshield, and that's when I noticed it. A shape in the driver's seat, not moving, not blinking, just watching. I tried to shake it off and went back inside, but as soon as I locked the door behind me, the car's headlights flicked on. I froze. My stomach twisted into knots. The car hadn't moved all night, and now, suddenly, it was awake. I stepped back behind the counter and checked the security cameras. The screen showed the car still sitting there, engine off, but the headlights on. The driver's seat was empty. I glanced back up at the glass doors, and there he was. A man, or something that looked like a man, standing just outside the store, inches from the glass, staring right at me. His face was pale, eyes too wide, mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. Then he started knocking. Tap, 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 slow, rhythmic. He didn't blink, he didn't speak, just kept knocking and grinning. I fumbled for the phone to call the police, but the second I picked it up, the power cut out. Everything went black. I swear I heard the doors creak open. I don't remember much after that. When the lights came back on, I was on the floor behind the counter. The store was empty, the doors were locked, and the car, gone. But the security footage was still running. I rewound it to when the power went out. The last thing the camera caught was the man standing inside the store, right behind me. I quit that night, and now, every time I see an empty car in a parking lot, I wonder if he's still watching. Story: the basement shift. I used to work the night shift at an old hotel. It wasn't a fancy place, just one of those off-the-highway stops where truckers and tired travelers crashed for the night. My job was simple: check guests in, monitor the cameras, and make sure everything stayed quiet. But there was one rule my manager told me on my first night. No matter what you hear, never open the basement door. I laughed it off, thinking it was just some weird joke. The basement was where they kept old furniture and cleaning supplies. Why would I ever go down there? Then one night, I heard it. A knock. I glanced at the monitor, checking the cameras. The hotel was empty except for one or two guests asleep in their rooms. The knock came again, louder this time. It was coming from the basement door. I stood frozen behind the front desk, staring at the dark hallway that led to it. I told myself it was just the pipes, the wind, anything but what I knew deep down. Someone was down there. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft, whimpering. "Hello? Please, help me. I'm trapped." My stomach twisted. It was a child's voice. A little girl. I grabbed my master key, my hands shaking. Maybe a guest's kid had wandered down there and gotten locked inside. That had to be it, right? I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding. The door was old, metal, with a heavy padlock, one that I knew was always locked. I placed my hand on the lock, ready to open it. Then the voice changed. "Please, help me. I'm so hungry." The tone was wrong, too deep, distorted. The whimpering turned into something else, a wet, gurgling sound. Then, scratching. Long, slow, scraping noises against the metal door. I backed away, my breathing ragged. Then the final thing happened that made me run. The knob twisted. Not just a little. It rattled violently, like whatever was inside was trying to break through. I sprinted back to the front desk and called my manager. When he answered, his voice was calm. Almost too calm. "You didn't open it, did you?" I told him no. He sighed in relief. "Good. Don't ever open that door, no matter what it sounds like. No matter what it says." The knocking stopped. I never worked another shift after that. I don't know what's in that basement, but I still have nightmares about that voice. Story: the man who never left. I used to work the night shift at a small motel off the highway. The kind of place that always smelled like stale coffee and bleach, where truckers and lost travelers stopped for a few hours of sleep before moving on. Most nights were quiet, almost too quiet. But there was one night I'll never forget. It started around 2:30 a.m. when the phone at the front desk rang. "Room 209, the voice on the other end whispered. "He's still in there." I froze. That room hadn't been rented out for weeks. It was under renovation. No guests, no furniture, nothing. Just an empty room. "Who is this?" I asked, but the line went dead. I checked the system. No one was in 209. The last person to stay there was months ago. A man who had checked in but never checked out. He died in that room. I told myself it was just a prank, but I had to be sure. I grabbed the master key and walked down the dimly lit hallway, stopping in front of the door. The handle was ice cold. I took a deep breath and unlocked it. The room was pitch black, no furniture, just bare floors and peeling wallpaper. But the second I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. Something felt wrong. Then I saw it, a shadow, standing in the corner, not breathing, just watching me. I stepped back, my pulse pounding. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, the shadow moved, not like a person, but like it melted into the darkness. And then I heard it, a whisper, right in my ear. "You're not supposed to be here." I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. But before I could even catch my breath, the phone at the front desk started ringing again. I picked it up with shaking hands. "Room 209, the voice whispered again. "You let him out." I quit that night. The next morning, I found my name tag sitting inside room 209, even though I had dropped it at the front desk. I don't know who or what was in that room, but I do know one thing. Room 209 is still empty, and the calls never stopped. Story: the wrong delivery. I used to work the night shift at a warehouse. It was mostly just unloading shipments, scanning inventory, and drinking enough coffee to stay awake until dawn. Nothing exciting ever happened, until one night when we got the wrong delivery. It was around 3 a.m. when the truck pulled up. We weren't expecting a shipment, but sometimes the schedules got mixed up. The driver stepped out, didn't say a word, just handed me a clipboard with a single instruction: "Store in the cold room, do not open." I glanced at the package. It was a large wooden crate, sealed shut with thick metal latches. No company logo, no shipping label, just a foul, rotting smell leaking from the cracks. I asked the driver who sent it. He just shook his head and muttered, "I don't ask questions, neither should you." Then he got back in his truck and drove off. My coworker Jake thought it was hilarious. "Come on, man, we have to open it. What if it's a treasure chest?" I told him no. The instructions were clear: do not open. But Jake didn't listen. While I was on my break, he grabbed a crowbar and pried the crate open. I'll never forget the sound that came next. A wet, gasping breath. I ran back just in time to see Jake staggering away from the crate, his face drained of all color. His mouth opened like he wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then I saw it, a hand, pale, too long, too many joints, crawling out from inside the crate. Jake stumbled backward, knocking over a shelf. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw its face. Hollow black eyes, a mouth that stretched too wide, skin that looked dead. And then it moved, not like a person. It jerked forward, its limbs bending the wrong way, pulling itself out of the crate with a sickening crack. I grabbed Jake and bolted. We locked ourselves in the office, gasping for air. On the security monitor, the thing crawled across the warehouse floor, its head twitching side to side like it was sniffing for us. Then it stopped. It slowly turned toward the camera, and it grinned. The screen went black. By the time security arrived at dawn, the crate was gone. The only thing left behind was Jake's crowbar and deep claw marks on the concrete floor. Jake quit the next day. So did I. And ever since that night, I refused to accept unexpected deliveries. Story: the thing in the drive-thru. I used to work the night shift at a fast food joint. Most nights were boring, just a few late-night customers, cleaning up, and waiting for the clock to hit 4 a.m. so I could go home. But one night, something came through the drive-thru that wasn't human. It was around 2:45 a.m. The place was dead, and I was half asleep at the register when the headset beeped. "Welcome to," I started, but the words caught in my throat. There was no voice, no order, just static. Then, a deep, crackling whisper, "I see you." I shivered, probably a prank. I checked the drive-thru monitor, and my stomach dropped. There was a car at the window, but something was wrong. The headlights were off, the engine wasn't running, and inside the car, there was a figure sitting in the driver's seat, motionless, not moving, not blinking, just sitting there, watching me. I hesitated, then grabbed my headset. Sir, can I take your order?" No response. The figure just sat there, its face hidden in the shadows. Then, the monitor glitched. For a second I saw something, a face stretched and pale, with hollow black eyes and a mouth far too wide. Then the screen went dark. I backed away from the counter, my hands shaking. The car was still there, the figure still staring at me. Then, slowly, it opened its mouth and smiled, not like a normal smile. This was unnatural, too wide, too many teeth. And then, it started moving. Not the car, the figure itself. It crawled out of the open window, pulling itself through like it had no bones. Its arms bent the wrong way as it dragged itself toward the window. I slammed the register shut and ran to the back. My coworker, Mike, looked at me like I was crazy. "Dude, what's wrong?" I pointed toward the window. "Something's out there." Mike walked over, pulled back the curtain, and frowned. "There's nothing there, man." I hesitated. The car was gone. The monitor was working again. The lot was empty. Mike shook his head and went back to cleaning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. As I turned off my headset, I heard one last thing before the feed cut out. A whisper. "See you soon." Story: The Man Who Didn't Blink. I used to work the night shift at a gas station off the highway. It was mostly empty after midnight, just a few truckers, the occasional lost traveler, and sometimes people who felt off. But one night, I met someone, or something, I'll never forget. It was around 3 a.m. when he walked in. Tall, thin, dressed in an old suit that looked like it had been sitting in a closet for decades. But what I noticed first were his eyes. They were too wide, and he didn't blink. Not once. He walked straight up to the counter and placed a single dollar bill on it. "Pump 6, he said. His voice was wrong, like someone trying to imitate human speech, but not quite getting it right. I glanced outside. Pump 6 was empty. No car, no truck, just an abandoned lot stretching into darkness. Do you have a car, sir?" I asked, forcing a nervous laugh. The man just smiled. "Pump 6, he repeated. I felt cold. My hands were sweating, and for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to look away from his face. It was like he was waiting for something. Then, he turned his head too far and looked at the security camera behind me. The screen glitched. For a second, the footage showed something impossible. The man was already standing outside, staring directly at the camera, but he was still right in front of me at the counter. I swallowed hard and slowly reached for the dollar. The moment my fingers touched it, my ears started ringing. The lights flickered, and he leaned in close. Too close. "Pump 6 is waiting," he whispered. Then he was gone, just vanished. I checked the cameras. The footage cut out exactly at 3:06 a.m. When it came back, there was no sign of him. I locked the doors and refused to serve anyone else that night. But before my shift ended, I finally worked up the nerve to check outside. Pump 6 was still empty, but the nozzle was hanging off the pump, dripping. And on the screen above it, the sale amount flickered between $6.66 and "Help me" before going dark. I never worked another night shift again. And to this day, I don't stop at gas stations after midnight. Some jobs are just that, a job, a paycheck, a way to pass the time. But sometimes, the night shift comes with more than just long hours and tired eyes. Sometimes, it brings something else. Something waiting in the shadows, watching from the corners, listening when you think you're alone. So the next time you clock in for a late shift, pay attention to the strange customers, to the voices in the empty rooms, to the things moving just outside the security camera's view. Because you never know if you'll make it to morning